Recording started.
Okay, so I'll just be talking about some stuff and then I'll ask you some questions along the way. So we're going to talk first of all about ecosystems and the parts that make them up. So just remember, an ecosystem is a region where both biotic and abiotic components interact together. Do you remember what biotic means again? Think of like the word biology. Yeah, so biotic is things that are alive. So anything like fish, algae, plants, those are all biotic. Abiotic, rocks, the water itself, the air, whatever. So both those things interact together, right? And so any one of those things as well is part of the system. Okay, so that's kind of just a definition of an ecosystem. We also talked in the lessons about the three main jobs of a wildlife manager. Okay, so these are the three main jobs, just going over those: gamekeeping, wildlife conservation, and pest control. I was just telling somebody recently about how Alberta is famous for not having any rats, which is kind of cool. Still don't know how that works exactly, but I guess they have some people kind of around the borders or whatever, not right around the borders, but they keep them out. So have you ever heard that before? No rats in Alberta? Yeah. Okay. So those are the three activities of or jobs of a wildlife manager. Now, if you're talking about a game manager, they carry out biological research, inventory control, habitat manipulation, and managing wildlife populations, I guess you could say. Do you want to take a stab at what any of those things might have to do with? Just any one of them that might kind of give you a few ideas about just looking at the words and you say, okay, I think I have a bit of an idea what that one's about. You want to try one of those? Okay, so knowing how many there are and the offspring, yeah, that's right. And some of these things kind of overlap as well, right? Like when you're looking at how many there are, that's inventory control. I don't know, have you worked at a job before, like a McDonald's or anything like that before? Because when you do inventory, that means you count everything, right? And sometimes they do that at a company and you take like the whole day or a couple of days, to count everything. It takes a long time. So yeah, that's what inventory control is about. So just a bit of a recap here. Biological research, biologists might tag animals and use tracking devices to track their whereabouts. Okay, so that's what this guy's doing, putting a tag on a turtle. Kind of reminds me, I was in Kananaskis once and I saw somebody tracking a bear. And then, some guy with a uniform, and he had this device. He's tracking the bear. And I go around the corner, and I see the bear that he's tracking. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, so yeah, we talked about inventory. When they count animals, determine the size of the population. Habitat manipulation. Okay, so when you manipulate something, you kind of change it, right? So the habitat is where the creature lives. So that's making sure the animals have enough space in their habitat. So one thing is when you're looking at protected areas like Banff or Jasper, which is pretty close to Edson, which you were talking about there, those protected areas are a type of habitat manipulation, right? Because they're changing the environment to make sure that creatures are going to be okay there. They're not going to get shot, for instance, right? Now when you talk about managing wildlife populations, so some things might be, for instance, culling animals, having to kill them, making sure that their numbers don't get too large, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's just a bit of a review on those activities of a game manager. When we talked about horned ungulates, okay, those guys, the one thing they all share in common is they possess cloven hooves. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind with those guys. Okay, so ungulates, cloven hooves. Now, bighorn sheep, mountain goats, sometimes people get them confused. They kind of think of them, you know, they get mixed up with them. Easy to confuse. Can you think of a difference between the two? Not so much in the way they look, but maybe in the way they behave, the types of environments they feel comfortable with. Any idea? Okay, so you've seen some bighorn sheep in Jasper and Banff along the roads where it's kind of cold and rainy. Yeah, I've noticed there's a lot more in Jasper than there are in Banff. So one of the main differences is that mountain goats are more agile than bighorn sheep. So you're going to see mountain goats up higher than bighorn sheep for the most part because they're better climbers. They have better you know, feet on the mountains. They're more sturdy, stable. Okay, so that's one important thing. Okay, this is just talking about the traits of antelopes that make them unique, and some of them are a bit of a surprise, I find. Like if you were thinking about antelopes, right? Let's just pretend that it was the Olympics. You've got the 2012 Olympics in London, in England, coming up pretty soon. So let's pretend antelopes were, you know, competing in the Olympics. What kind of event do you think they'd compete in? What kind of event do you think maybe they wouldn't be so good at? Any idea? Okay, yeah, they'd be good runners, wouldn't they? What's surprising about antelopes is they're not very good jumpers. Okay, you would think that they would be, but that's something they're not so good at. So they're fast runners. Their horns contain hair-like substances, and they live in the grasslands. Okay, now how about moose? Have you seen many moose before in your life? Have you seen them out in the wild? Okay, can you think of what type of environment they like to live in? I suppose it may not necessarily be the type that you've seen them in, but do you know what's kind of their preferred place to live? Okay, forests, and usually specific parts of forests, like swampy areas like this here, so kind of a marshy type swampy area. Okay. All right, so this next picture here is showing a black bear compared to a grizzly bear. Can you think of at least one difference between the two? Okay, how about their size? Do you think they're both the same, or? Yeah, grizzly bear is definitely bigger. And another thing is that a grizzly bear has a hump on its back. And also black bears, they don't leave as much of a paw print. Now, I'm not sure if that's only because they're less heavy, that that's the reason, or if it has something to do with, you know, something else, maybe the way their paws are set up or something, the way their feet are set up. I don't know. So anyways, okay, now we'll kind of shift into talking about grouses. And I just wanted to point out that the name of the different grouses, the names kind of suggest who they are. Like for instance, the ruffed grouse. If you know what, someone says they had a ruff around their neck. We used to say that about a dog that we had before. She had a ruff around her neck. A ruff is just kind of an area around a creature's neck. It's kind of raised or whatever. Okay, so a ruffed grouse has a tuft of black feathers around its neck. Blue grouse, it's blue, Sharp-tailed grouse have sharp tails, right? So yeah, their names do kind of make it easy for us, eh? Okay, how about all the different upland birds, like, pheasant, those kind of creatures? Do you know what you would say is the main trait that's shared by all of them? Any idea? It has to do with another type of creature that they're kind of similar to. Another kind of bird that all of them sort of resemble. Okay. Yeah, and in general, chicken. Yeah, they're all kind of chicken-like, and I forget what the name is. There's a certain name for that, but anyways, they're all chicken-like. And I just put a little cartoon here. So this guy says to his wife, they're right. We really do taste like chicken. Have you ever heard people say, what does lobster taste like? Oh, it tastes like chicken. Or what is such and such? Oh, it tastes like chicken. So yeah, I don't know if frogs taste at all like chicken, but anyways, I like the picture. Okay, so let's kind of shift gears again then, and we'll look at stuff like first aid and CPR, that sort of thing, dealing with people who are injured. So let's say you come up against a guy like this, come across a guy like this. What are the first two things you should do when you come across an injured person? What things should you check for? Okay, good. Check for a pulse, right? So a heartbeat, another way of saying it, and whether they're breathing as well. Okay, now this guy here, he's having a heart attack, or rather he's in cardiac arrest, I should say, a little bit of a difference. So he's in cardiac arrest, so just like arrest, like the word kind of suggests, something stops, right? So your heart stops beating. Now, if you're in cardiac arrest and your heart stops beating, can you think of three things? There's three things that happen when you're in cardiac arrest. Can you think of any of those things? What other types of body systems are going to be affected if your heart stops beating? Or what things are not going to happen if your heart stops beating? Just think about what your heart does, and think about what it won't do if it stops beating, or what's not going to happen. That's right. We're not going to have circulation of the blood. Good. Okay, so that's this one here. Blood stops circulating. Also, we're going to stop breathing as well, and we're going to lose consciousness eventually, right? Fairly soon, actually. Okay, so all three of those things are going to happen in cardiac arrest. Okay, so this person is doing CPR. They have to put their hands just the right way. Kind of often you thread your fingers together like that. And so remember, CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And now when you're doing a chest compression, when you're doing that in CPR, what two things do you think that's going to accomplish? Think about where you're doing it and why that would be. Okay, good. That's one of them, is to pump the heart. Okay, so allow the heart to continue to pump and circulate the blood around the body. So since the heart's pumping, it's going to allow the blood to circulate, right? They're kind of related. Okay, so the next question says, Know which steps are done before CPR. These tell you that CPR now needs to be done. But rather than talking about steps that need to be done, I probably should have said, know what you need to check before CPR. And so what you need to check that a person is not breathing or conscious after giving them a rescue breath. Okay, so first, before you started any CPR, you would have done a rescue breath, and you would have found that it hasn't caused them to start breathing, and they're not conscious, and so because of that, you're going to do CPR. Okay? And now this next part here says, know what the ABCs of CPR stand for. Any idea? Okay. What they stand for, and sometimes people think of it a little bit differently. These guys are calling it CAB, and they're saying compression, airway, and breathing. But a lot of times people say airway, breathing, and circulation. Okay, because those are the three things you want to look at. You want to make sure that someone's airway is not plugged up, you know, that they're not choking, and you want to clear it out, right? You want to get them breathing. If they're not breathing, you want to get them breathing. You want their blood to be circulating. So those are three really important things, of course, right? You know, again, this is saying compression, airway, and breathing. And tilting the person's head is going to give them a better airway, right? And this is breathing mouth-to-mouth rescue breaths. Okay, so we got a picture here of someone's bleeding arm. I don't know. That's interesting. I'm not really sure if that's for real or kind of fake, but the blood's just running so parallel. I'm not sure. Who knows? Could be. Anyways, so what's the reason why you elevate a bleeding body part? Yep, exactly. It keeps the blood from going to it. Slow down blood loss. Okay, what is the correct order of steps in treating someone with a burn? And this is actually wrong, what I wrote here, because it should be, number 1 should be apply a wet cloth, number 2 should be apply a sterile dressing, and number 3 should be tape the dressing to the area. Okay, because you always want to do the thing, whether you're treating a burn or whether you're treating a broken leg or something, you always want to kind of deal with the most important thing first. And so first of all, you want to cool the area down, so that's why you apply a wet cloth first. Then you can put the dressing on and then take the dressing. Now, with that same sort of idea that you always treat the most important thing first, what's the correct order of steps in treating someone with a broken bone? Well, what do you think is the most important thing? If you got a broken bone, then you're unstable, right? Things are unstable. You know, it's broken, so you can't walk on it or move it, sort of thing. So because of that, what do you think is the first thing you need to do in treating a broken bone? Just kind of a general way of describing what you would do with that broken bone. Any idea? Okay. Well, if it's if it's unstable, if it's not staying together, you want it to stay together, make it stable. So the first thing is you want to use a splint, right? So you can roll up some newspaper or something like that, use some cardboard, use something very stiff, right, to make a splint. So that's the first thing you want to do. Then you apply cold, and the reason for that is to bring the swelling down, right? And then take the person to the emergency department. Okay, so those are the steps in treating a broken bone. Now, I'm just mentioning here about 3 layers that are needed if someone's going out hunting. So the 3 different types of things that are needed by hunters' clothes are warmth, protection, and comfort. Any idea if you looked at a hunter's jacket and you had, say, 3 different layers, so you were starting with the layers that are closest to your body, then moving outward, which layer would be provided first? Like, would the first layer provide warmth, protection, or comfort? What do you think the order would be going from closest to your body to furthest away? Okay, comfort, warmth, and protection. That's right. And so we'll look at that just on the next page here. Okay, so here we see the ones closest to you are comfort, and then next is going to be warmth, and then last is protection, like you said. Good, right on. Okay, so looking at the next part here, you know, there's different conditions that you might come across if you're hunting. Have you ever hunted before? Yeah, me neither. So anyways, if you were hunting, I have some friends who hunt a lot, but if you were hunting, what kind of clothes do you think might be the best for cold weather? Now I know that this is kind of, you know, somebody might say this is the best, somebody might say this is the best. Like if you had a jacket and you wanted to wear like a really warm jacket for cold weather, any idea what some things are that it might be filled with that would make it really good for cold weather? Yeah, a down-filled jacket's really good for cold weather. How about hot weather? What kind of materials are really good for hot weather? Keep you cool. Okay, well, cotton's really good, eh? Like if you have a cotton shirt, that's really good for cold weather. How about if you knew the weather is going to be changeable? Like you go out there and you're not really sure whether it's going to be hot or cold, like how hot or cold. Any idea how you would dress, like what's a way of describing how you would dress in that sort of a situation? Okay. What I was just thinking about is if you're wearing layers, right? Like you've got layers of clothes, so because you've got layers of clothes, you can take off certain layers. You know, you can take off one layer if it's not, you know, you thought it was cold, but it's not quite as cold. You can take two of them off. So that's kind of the way you can dress if it's kind of changeable weather or unpredictable. Okay. So, so again, this just kind of summarizes the three things we talked about. Okay, now, so say you're camping. When you're camping, there's different stuff that kind of protects you from different types of elements. And so, you know, a tarp, something like a tarp will give certain types of protection. A ground sheet, which is going to be underneath your tent, will protect you from certain things. And if you have a foam mattress that you're sleeping on, that's going to protect you against certain things as well. So any idea, if you thought about, say, something like a ground sheet, what do you think it would protect you from? What type of elements is it going to keep away from you? Yeah, that's right. And water is probably going to be a big one, right? If it rains during the night, that ground sheet's going to be really good because, you know, it's hopefully going to keep some of that rain from not coming in, most of it. And a foam mattress, what type of element is it going to protect you from? Yeah, mainly the cold, maybe the water, you know, water as well. So this just kind of goes over what each of those things protects you from. So tent fly, wind and rain, ground sheet, rain, or, you know, wetness, foam mattress, cold and rain. Good. And here I'm just mentioning the fact that when you talk about what makes a dangerous axe, I don't know if you ever heard this before, but a dull axe is usually more dangerous than a sharp axe. And also, something you might not have known is that a cold handle is not so good. An axe with a cold handle can break more easily, so it's good to warm up your handle if it's really cold, if you're using an axe. All right. Now, the term landmark, when you talk about what a landmark is, it's kind of a recognizable object. And I just put this here. This is a landmark you'll see around Sudbury, Ontario. I don't know if you've ever been to Ontario much before, or Sudbury. But, oh, you've been there, eh? So you see the big nickel there? Cool. So I chose a good one then. I used to see that quite a bit. I lived in Ontario. My mom grew up in Sudbury, so I'd go to see my grandparents there. And yeah, so that's kind of a landmark. So it's a recognizable object. And so when you're talking about when you're hunting, a recognizable object would be something like, you know, a tree, or maybe a stream or something like that. Something that's going to help a hunter recognize that they're in a certain area. So they were in an area, then say they go to another area, they want to get back to that area. They're looking for that landmark to be able to recognize where they are. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at is just the difference between hypothermia and frostbite. So both of them, of course, deal with the cold, right? Can you think of what might be a difference between hypothermia and frostbite? Okay, frostbite's with your skin, and hypothermia has to do with the inside of your body. Good. And hypothermia is kind of an overall body temperature, right? It means that your body temperature has dropped too low overall, whereas frostbite's kind of more having to do with certain body parts, like you know, say your finger or your nose becomes damaged by frostbite. So that's kind of a way of thinking of the difference of them, between them. Okay, awesome. So I think that's it. Okay, there's just showing hypothermia. Someone's gotten in really cold water. Frostbite with someone's fingers. Tissue damage, of course. Not fun. I don't know if you ever see movies of people up on Mount Everest, climbing mountains, really high mountains. You see that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming to this session, Haley. And also, just a reminder, we've got the photography test tomorrow. Yeah. So I guess I will let you go. And yeah, I guess if we don't chat before the spring break, which is coming up soon, hope you have a really good spring break. All right. Thanks a lot. Well, have a great day, and God bless. Bye for now.